Hey guys, welcome to Reddit Brew. You know the drill. We're back at it again with the Reddit stories. So let's jump into it, shall we? Desperately need to get married first? Fine. Okay, so this isn't my story, it's my mom's. My paternal aunt is, to put it nicely, an entitled, manipulative, selfish, attention-seeking, narcissistic bitch. And I promise that I wrapped her up in buttercream frosting, fondant, and sugar sprinkles in that definition. She truly is an awful woman. Anyway, in the mid-90s, after 2-ish years of dating, my dad proposed to my mom. Everyone was happy for them, except for my aunt. She was jealous that the attention wasn't on her and that she wasn't getting married first. My dad's a few years older than her, so hitting major milestones before her really wasn't intentional or a flex or anything. So my aunt bullied her boyfriend of 7 months into proposing, and then went on to be the biggest bridezilla ever. My mom had always wanted a summer wedding, and once my aunt became aware of that fact, she made it her mission to make sure it didn't happen. She threw so many tantrums and shed so many crocodile tears that she wore down my parents and everyone who supported them. But this was not the end. I'd also like to add that my parents couldn't wait until the next summer because there were so many sick, elderly relatives on both sides who wanted to be at the wedding, and everyone knew they didn't have long enough until the next summer. Most of them actually died in the 4 months after my parents' wedding. While trying to get over the disappointment of having to have a fall wedding instead of a summer wedding, my mom had had some friends and cousins over to help her come up with ideas for her wedding. It was all a hodgepodge of stuff that clashed with each other, and most of it wasn't even my mom's taste. My aunt came over to borrow something or whatever and saw all the bridal magazines on the kitchen table, and one was open to a page of sunflowers. My aunt immediately went into a rage. Sunflowers were her favorite. If she didn't have sunflowers, her wedding would be ruined. Her life would be ruined. She would die if her wedding flowers weren't sunflowers. My mom liked sunflowers enough, even grew some in our backyard, but she didn't want them as her wedding flowers. Plus, they would be out of season by the time for her wedding, that they would be crazy expensive. So she told my aunt to chill and listed the reasons above for why she wasn't considering them. Her cousin had left the magazine like that. Suddenly, my aunt goes, "Well, they are really ugly, all brown in the middle," and started ragging on this flower she had been throwing a tantrum over 30 seconds ago. My mom's not an idiot and has 5 older brothers. She knows what's going on. My aunt only wanted stuff so that my mom couldn't, and was going to do this about every single fucking thing. She could see it in her eyes. So after my aunt left, my mom starts making 2 wedding binders. One had the things she liked or was going to consider. The other one was filled with the most hideous, tacky things that the mid-90s Canadian wedding industry had to offer. The first binder was kept at my maternal grandparents' house for safekeeping so that my aunt would never find it. The second was placed on a bookshelf in my parents' apartment. This was A, to make sure my aunt didn't copy all of my mom's ideas, and B, revenge. A couple weeks later, she and my dad went to my paternal grandparents' house for my grandmother's birthday. Obviously, the topic of weddings came up, and my aunt got so excited and happy that my mom started to feel bad about the second binder and thinking so poorly of my aunt. And then, when my grandmother asked about my mom's wedding, my aunt threw a fit and demanded to never hear any talk about my parents' wedding because the date was still so close to hers, and it was stressing her out. Hers was in July, my parents' was in September. Immediately, all guilt was gone. Just like that. My mom said she didn't want to stress my aunt out, so she agreed not to talk about it. Easier to keep stuff from my aunt that way. But my grandma did want to at least see if my mom had picked out a dress. She hadn't, but she knew exactly which one she wanted. And she had seen the same magazine on my grandmother's coffee table and would be happy to show her. My aunt's head perks up. bait taken. My mom proceeded to point out the ugliest dress in the entire magazine, one she'd laughed about with her friends, because who would willingly wear something that bad? Well, what do you know? It was my aunt's dream dress, and she has an appointment that Friday to try it on and buy it. And how dare my mom try to take more from me than you already have? We still don't know what she meant by that. Hook, line, and sinker. My mom agreed not to buy the dress, and my dad asked if she'll be taking it out of the wedding binder at their apartment or keep it there for inspiration. Suddenly, my aunt seemed very interested in visiting their apartment. Not to look at the binder, though. No. Of course not. She proceeds to invite herself over frequently, or let herself in by telling the landlord they were expecting her. Their landlord was a prick. The binder goes missing from the bookshelf more than once. My mom didn't care. Side note, my dad only cared about 4 things in regards to the wedding. 1, he married my mom. 2, the venue had to be accessible for disabled people so that as many of their sick, elderly relatives could attend as possible. 3, there was beef at the reception. And 4, the cake didn't have fondant. So he paid attention to basically nothing and just did what my mom, grandmothers, and her bridesmaids told him to. So July comes and it's my aunt's wedding. It's an absolute train wreck. It was all just generally horrible, but here are the bullet points. The groom obviously did not want to be there. The ceremony venue was in an old-ass church with no ramp. So some of the elderly relatives had a hard time getting into the building, and others just left. Seriously, my great aunt apparently publicly said, "Fuck this! I don't care about that sociopath enough to deal with her idiotic location choice." Hailed a cab and left. The flowers were red roses, which wouldn't have been so bad if the color for everything else wasn't dark green or pylon orange. Seriously, it looked like there had been a car accident on Christmas Eve, but in a church. The decorations themselves were all just really cheap, poorly made, and vaguely Xmas or winter themed. Again, weird, because there was a heat wave. The reception was held in a poorly lit room, so half the guests couldn't see. The DJ played nothing but Overcoming a Breakup songs at the bride's request and wasn't allowed to play anything else. The food was all bland, cold, there wasn't enough for everyone, and the portions were tiny. All of the cutlery was cheap plastic because they'd spent their dinnerware budget on custom plastic plates that the guests could take home. These plates were flimsy plastic with a fuzzy and poorly drawn cartoon bride and groom with a red and dark green polka dot border on the edge of the plate. She got drunk early on and didn't dance with the groom once. Made a 30-minute speech that was all about herself. Flirted with the best man in front of everyone. The cake was absolutely disgusting. It was way too sweet and 40% fondant. The centerpieces were a ring of roses around a Disney character bobblehead. This wasn't in my mom's binder. My aunt is just a psycho about Disney and was openly smug to my mom about the stuff at her wedding. There's more, but that's all I can list at the moment. Anyway, no one would say it to her face, but her wedding was awful, and the majority of the guests left hours before it was supposed to be over. My aunt tells my dad, "There's still time to run. You two won't last." She gloats and is snide and smug until my parents' wedding. I don't want to make this post any longer than it already is, so I won't describe their wedding in detail, but basically, it was beautiful. The venue and reception hall were both gorgeous and accessible. The food was subpar, but that was the caterer's fault. But the portions were great, and the beef still came out okay. The cake was fantastic, and my parents still recommend that bakery to people getting married. The DJ was also awesome, kept everyone dancing and having a good time. There were 4 heartfelt speeches for my parents that took 2 minutes or less each, and then my parents quickly thanked everyone for their love and support and hoped they had a good time. My mom's dress and veil were so beautiful and timeless that I would actually consider wearing it at my wedding. Can't though. She's 5'5" and I'm 5'11". My mom didn't notice because she was too busy getting married to my dad and enjoying herself, but my aunt was fuming that she had spent months believing that she had stolen my mom's dream wedding, and instead, my mom had an amazing event our family still talks about, aunt, well, she had the nightmare love child of Santa Claus and Walt Disney. Her first marriage didn't even last 6 months. She scratched his face out of her wedding photos, and she demanded and stole, if they weren't promptly given, other people's copies of her wedding photos. My mom hid all of her copies and the second wedding binder though, and showed them to me when she told me this story last year. The best part about my mom's revenge is that she didn't actually do anything. If my aunt hadn't felt the need to one-up my parents, she wouldn't have had the nightmarish fever dream she did. If she hadn't essentially broken into their apartment sometimes to steal that binder, she would have come up with her own ideas. She brought everything on herself. Oh man, the visuals I got while reading this story were great. If this was made into a movie, I would absolutely watch the crap out of it. Great story, OP. Mom is a legend. Also, I'm happy to report that I read in the comments that OP and her parents have been no contact with this aunt for about 2 years, because somehow the aunt has become even more insufferable over the years. And I say, good choice and good riddance. But anyway, that is all from me today. I hope you enjoyed this sweet revenge story. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe. I truly appreciate when you do, and I will see you in the next Reddit story. Bye!